Yes, hi everybody, and welcome to this presentation. Let me introduce Laura Sommer, who is from Germany and lives in Heidelberg. And their pronouns are they and them. And this is Laura's third Autscape and their first presentation for an autistic audience. And the title of this presentation is, But I could have told you, Vincent, critical consumption of harmful narratives. And please note that this is a quite heavy topic, and there will be talk about suicide among autistic people. There will be trigger warnings, and please remember that it's okay to leave at any stage if you feel you need to. There will be opportunities to comment at certain points of the presentation, and there will be discussions in breakout rooms at the end. And as always, this is optional. You can join or not, just as you like. Now over to Laura.
Thank you, Katja. Thank you all for this space to talk about something that has been really important to me. I want to talk about media narratives, and I want to talk about how we can be more aware of what we consume and how we consume it, and what we internalize and how to not internalize stuff that may be dangerous for us. And the idea for this came about 1.5 years ago, when I was, again, for the millionth time, singing one of the songs I grew up with by Don McLean, the song Vincent, where he talks about Vincent van Gogh's life, paintings mostly, and his suicide. And I was realizing that I was singing a part that always seemed, I saw myself represented in that song a lot in the depiction of Vincent, and I realized, no, I will no longer, I can no longer like easily sing that, because there's a part that seems damaging to me, and I will come to that later. But that was the origin of the idea for that talk. And again, there will be 3 songs in this presentation that I will play in snippets or in whole, and those songs will they will contain mentions of death and or suicide. So before each song, I will again give a trigger warning, so you can either turn off your sound system, so you don't have to hear them. You can just read the lyrics, or you can just completely kind of tune out for that. You can leave at any time. You can talk to people later. There will be room for discussion if you're triggered, if you don't feel well with the topic. And Kaylin just wrote in the chat that there's a support channel on Discord also. So I don't know if you all received the read the announcement email this morning from Kaylin with the worksheet. If not, you can just open the email and download the worksheet. You don't have to. It's just for your convenience to kind of scribble into it if you print it out or have it on your computer. But I will also upload it now. So screen share it.
Laura, yeah? I've also put the worksheet in the chat for anybody who wants to catch it out of there.
That's perfect. Okay. So for media analysis of our critical consumption of media, it is helpful to have some terms to use, to have some tools or skills or stuff we can use to identify common themes or hurtful or dangerous themes. So I have put up here some terms I'm going to use throughout the presentation, and some definitions I've either come up with or found online. And I will shortly explain those terms, and then after each explanation, I will illustrate with examples from autistic representation or disabled representation. The first term I'm going to use is the term coding. English is not my first language, so I don't know how those terms are used in everyday language, or if it is rather like academic language. So I'm just going to explain it anyway. The definition I've come up with for coding is a possibility for writers, storytellers, artists to describe a character with the help of stereotypes that are easily and quickly recognizable. Those stereotypes don't have to be representative of real existing people or groups, but must be recognizable by the majority of the audience. That means a storyteller, a filmmaker, has only a short time to make a movie, has 90 minutes, 2 hours, and wants people to quickly understand what those people are about. Like really using shorthand for the audience so that people don't have to like be puzzled what the filmmaker is trying to say or what the composer of the song is trying to say. So coding works like this. You rely on stereotypes that have been used and that the audience will recognize, and you use them again. You reinforce them, and you kind of recycle them. That can be helpful for storytelling, but it can be very harmful because many of those stereotypes misrepresent people. And you might, for example, know this. One example of coding is how to identify the villain in a story. And unfortunately, villains have often been coded, for example, with physical disabilities, with physical imperfections. So there has been a long history of on-screen or even literature representation of bad guys and villains with by linking them with, for example, a hunchback in Richard III, or like try to find a Bond villain that hasn't a physical disability. So that would be a coding that is, in this case, also harmful. Also, in the last, let's say 100 years of filmmaking, many villains have also been coded queer, which is also really damaging to the queer community. Like having many villains with male villains having female traits or female clothing style. So that there is stuff that has been used and that is recognized by the audience and works as a code, but is damaging to particular groups. Autistic coding. I have listed some stereotypes when autistic characters are depicted. Those characters don't necessarily need to be named as autistic, but when storytellers or songwriters or authors try to represent a certain type of person, sometimes many autistic people can identify partly with that person. So the list I've come up with is a person is characterized as lonely, as sad, is recognized by the surrounding as different, lives in a world of their own, is isolated, is talented and gifted, is sometimes portrayed as innocent or angelic. That's a code that like a stereotype that comes up often. As in following that, as non-human, as beyond reach, as unable to communicate, as emotionless, and having no empathy. So there are tons of more autistic stereotypes or stereotypes that autistic people feel like, wow, I feel like I'm portrayed here, but I'm misrepresented. So if you know any more stereotypes, you can kind of collect them and later in the group discuss them too. Just need a little, sorry. The next term I've used before, I think, is the term of representation. The definition I've come up with is characters in art and media that a person or a group can partially identify with based on characteristics that can be recognized as one's own. This kind of is what I mentioned before. If you consume media and you feel like this resonates with me, something in that character or that depiction, I kind of see myself in that. And it can be like completely like, I'm really happy with representation that is really me, and I'm really happy with how I'm portrayed, or like people like me are portrayed. Or it can be, well, yeah, I agree with the parts of it, but those other parts are not really helpful. So that really depends on how, yeah, probably how much the storytellers actually listen to the people they portray. And also, for example, for autistic representation, the character doesn't have to be named as autistic for autistic people to see themselves in that character. And especially in the songs we'll listen to later, the word autistic will not like be mentioned, but many autistic people will see themselves represented in that in those depictions. So the third term I find really helpful for this analysis is the term of tropes. Here I found a very helpful page called TV Tropes. They collect all the tropes there are, so you can yeah, look up what if you think, oh, this might be a thing, this might be a repetitive thing, you can look it up on tvtropes.org. A trope is a storytelling device or convention, a shortcut for describing situations the storyteller can reasonably assume the audience will recognize. So it's similar to coding, but it's not like shorthand for a character type, but it's shorthand for situations. It's like puzzle pieces of scenarios. So like one really famous trope that has been used since Shakespeare and probably earlier in romantic comedies is the trope of the two people who hate each other, then eventually find out they have to fall in love with each other, then fall out again, and then come back together. So like, it's really it's patterns that make storytelling easy and sometimes even look a bit like cliche and used too often. And again, there are tropes that are used for convenience, for, yeah, everybody tells stories like that, but that can actually be damaging for certain communities. For example, the so-called kill your queers trope is that when you, if you watch movies or TV shows and get really attached to a queer character because you feel finally represented, or even queer couples, very often the characters get written out of the series and getting killed off. And that is really upsetting because it happens again and again and again. That means not only you lose representation, but you just learn, the only representation you see is this person has no space. It has no place in the story. So I don't have a place in the story. So where is my place? And that is really dangerous and damaging. And I try to identify some similar tropes with disabled or autistic characters or autistic coded characters that are equally damaging and that I would like to discuss with you in the following songs. So those tropes are tropes connected especially with disabled and autistic deaths, because autistic characters are also often like written out of the story. The deaths or even the suicides are described as tragic and sad, but they are romanticized. They are described as unavoidable and just the way it is. This is how our cruel and horrible world works. Oh, you poor innocent person, you didn't have a place in this world. Well, we never forget you. This is the basic trope. And also it is not met with outrage and with the call to action to change things and to make the world accessible for people or make a place for us, but is met with apathy and lethargy. So all the death of those characters are good for is inspiration for a romantic or for a sad song. And that is what I found in several songs. And after we've gone through those 3 songs, I would like to show you another song that is a positive example, and I would like you to give you the chance to work on that song yourselves. And yeah, also I would call out for a change of narrative, for a reclaiming of narrative, and to change that apathy and lethargy trope to kind of call for action and outrage and anger and reclaiming our space in the story. So the first song, and one friend I showed this presentation to noted that all those songs are from the period of the 60s. That is my bias. I wasn't aware of that, but yeah, the songs are all from the 60s, and there are probably millions of other examples, but somehow those songs were my focus. So the first song is Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles. I've cut a bit to save time, and I need to I hope you can all hear this. If it's too loud, just tune it down. If the song is too much for you, just switch off the stereo. Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where a wedding is being. So, if you remember the autistic coding we've like identified, I found a lot of autistic coding in that song, even though the character is not explicitly named as autistic. What I found really like resonated with me was the phrase "wearing a face that she keeps in a jar by the door," as a kind of like, it feels like masking, feels like having to pretend to be another person to be able to communicate with other people. Then lives in a dream, this coding of being in her own world, being set apart from other people. Picks up the rice in a church where a wedding has been. She's not part of the wedding, she's kind of comes there afterwards, and she's not part of the gathering. Then of course the loneliness, the isolation. Father Mackenzie also writing a sermon that no one will hear. He tries to communicate, and he fails. He can't. Like people ignore him, pass him by. And then of course Eleanor Rigby's death. This is the trope again. The not only death, but death in a public space where people should be listening and watching. And there's also this like this coding of the innocence, the angelic thing, like dying in a church. And then of course being buried along with her name, like vanishing completely. And yeah, the of course the repetition of the loneliness and the isolation. So the tropes we have is the death, the kind of what a horrible society that leaves people alone, but also in the lyrics and also in the music, a kind of apathy and a kind of like, oh, isn't it horrible? Or isn't it tragic? But no call to action, like an observer telling a story, but not from the perspective. It's not Eleanor Rigby telling the story and being angry about her death, but it's somebody being like inspired to write a sad song about it. So you are all welcome to kind of make your own notes, and later on, I think it's better in the discussion if we kind of have your input too on those songs. So just feel free to make your notes if you find more coding or more tropes, or if you disagree with my interpretation, that we can discuss this later in the breakout sessions. So the next song is really difficult to listen to because it has a really, really melancholic melody. And please take care of yourselves, and if it's too much, just switch off the sound. And there is mention of a suicide method, and I will not play that, and I've cut it out of the lyrics as well. It's a song by Simon and Garfunkel, and it's called The Most Peculiar Man.
And all the people said, what a shame that he's dead. But wasn't he a most peculiar man?
Okay, I have to admit that that song, like, it's difficult for me also because the music gets me every time, and I hope you're all okay. Yeah, I find the autistic coding really hits me in the face every time I listen to it, even though I think Paul Simon didn't know of the word autism or was intending to kind of represent autistic people, but I think many people resonate with those lyrics. And it starts with somebody being described by an outsider as most peculiar. We don't hear this man speak himself, but we hear him being talked about and described as peculiar, different, strange. And the person who has expertise is the person who lives upstairs. So people grant her expertise because she lived like in proximity, not because she actually knows the person. And then we have the loneliness again. We have the isolation. It's getting like closer and closer, lived all alone within a house, within a room, within himself. And the having no friends, not being able to communicate, and that causing people to decide not to communicate with him. And it is assumed that he isn't friendly and he doesn't care, and most importantly, he's different from them again. Then we have his death. This is the trope of suicide again. And there's an assumption of how he would see this world, why he would choose not to stay in this world, because his world is so silent and his world is so small and tiny. And the sentence or the phrase in the song that gets me the most every time is the last, when it said, and all the people said, what a shame that he's dead, but wasn't he a most peculiar man? That there's this but. It's a shame that he's dead, but he was strange. And that really hurts me every time, because it feels familiar. It feels kind of, well, it's horrible what, like, you getting bullied, or it's horrible you're excluded, but you are strange. And this is consuming a song, seeing yourself represented in that song, and it feels like somebody understands you. It feels like somebody sees your pain, but it stops there. What Paul Simon often does in his songs, he makes a really nice melody that, if you don't listen to the lyrics, sounds like it must be a really sweet and happy song. And then you look at the lyrics and find out it's really, really distressing content. And it seems like Paul Simon, who wrote the song, is judging the people, but it stops there. It's like with Eleanor Rigby. There's a judgment of this horrible, cruel world that treats people like that, but that's where it stops. There's no, the man doesn't have a chance to speak, or there's no outrage, or no real anger and like call to change the situation. So consuming that song was always, like, at one hand, really, I felt represented. On the other hand, it reinforced the destiny, or like the image. That's what happens to people like me. And I find it really dangerous, and I don't want to internalize that anymore. So the last song I'm going to play is last song of the negative examples, is the song that I've talked earlier about. It's the song Vincent by Don McLean. I'm not going to play the whole song. Okay, so sorry. again, the music is always a bit difficult for me too. So yeah, as I said, this was the song that triggered the idea in me of I need to discuss this. And it starts here. The description of the assumed reasons for Vincent's suicide. We have again the being not one of them, being apart, being different. We have a different coding here. We don't have the emotionlessness or the not being empathetic. We have like the recognition and the validation of Vincent's love for other people. That's something many autistic people also kind of identify with, trying to show other people love, but not being able to get that through. Then the hopelessness, the isolation, then the suicide, and then here again, this, as lovers often do, as that's just what happens. This trope of, well, in this cruel world, that's just what happens to people who love, which I find, yeah, really hurtful. And then this sentence, but I could have told you, Vincent, this world was never meant for one as beautiful as you. This is a sentence that is so beautiful and so dangerous because it validates your feelings, it validates you, it describes you as beautiful. People who can identify with this characterization of this Vincent character see somebody who is like them and who is told to be beautiful. And this being beautiful is also the qualifier for having no place in this world. And this is dangerous because it's basically like you hunger, you starve for representation that is actually validating, and this validation is wrapped around something really toxic. And here is the point where we need to be really careful with what we consume and what we take in, because I have been singing that line very often when it meant a lot to me, because this feeling of not belonging and this feeling of I don't feel like there's a place for me, and I felt validated, but it also reinforces that. It doesn't challenge it, it doesn't change it. The sentence, perhaps they never will. Well, then make them listen. Well, then make a place for me in this world. Kind of demanding that we reclaim our narrative, we reclaim our outrage and our like frustration and our hurt and our pain, and having people sing about our pain is validating, but at the same time it is inaction. And so what I would call for is for critical consumption of any kind of media, is that if we feel represented, if we feel a character resonates with us, being really careful what this character transports. So I will still love this song, I will still listen to this song, and I will always love this song, but I will try to be careful and to be aware and what it transports and what do I want to internalize. I want to internalize that I'm beautiful, but I don't want to internalize that there's no place for me. I don't want to internalize that this world wasn't meant for me, because it was. Basically, like, we're all born on this planet. And one way of doing this is, don't know if we can share this with you. I think I can't. For example, making art, making a badge with the picture of the Starry Night, with the lyrics of, for I could have told you, Vincent, this world was never meant for one as beautiful as you, and crossing the never out. So, so you can, oh, sorry, we have a raised hand. Was it just Katja or was it?
Yes, it was me, and I just have to tell you it's 1:10 now, so.
So now what I will do now is I will play you another song, and with that song and this worksheet, you can go to the breakout sessions and like look at the narratives there and look at the tropes there and the coding, and I'm really looking forward for your input. And so thank you very much for your attention, and whew, I think I made it through. Okay, so have fun with Make Your Own Kind of Music by Mama Cass.